It was late at night and the air was heavy with cold mist. Outside the sleepy town of Willow Creek, the roads were quiet except for the occasional chirp of crickets or the rustle of leaves in the wind. Officer Daniel Carter drove slowly along, Highway 17, his patrol car's engine humming softly as he scanned the area. The headlights cut through the thick fog, revealing only patches of empty asphalt ahead. It was just another routine patrol, but something about the stillness made him uneasy. Daniel had been a cop in Willow Creek for nearly 10 years. He knew these roads like the back of his hand. This stretch of highway, though usually deserted, always gave him a strange feeling. Maybe it was because it passed so close to Cemetery Ridge Road, where old legends whispered of ghosts and unmarked graves. Or maybe it was simply the loneliness of the place. Whatever it was, Daniel trusted his instincts, and tonight they were telling him to stay alert. As he rounded a bend, static crackled from the radio mounted on the dashboard. "Unit 43, this is dispatch," came the voice of Cheryl, the night operator. "We've received reports of suspicious activity near Cemetery Ridge Road. A black hearse was seen speeding away from the funeral home. Can you check it out?" "Copy." "That," Daniel replied, picking up the mic. "I'm not far from there. I'll head over now." He turned onto Cemetery Ridge Road, a narrow lane flanked by tall trees whose branches seemed to claw at the sky. The fog here was thicker, almost swallowing the beams of his headlights. Daniel slowed down even more, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the road. Then, up ahead, he spotted it. A sleek black hearse moving quickly despite the poor visibility. The vehicle swerved slightly as it took a sharp turn onto a desolate country road. Daniel activated his siren and sped up, signaling the driver to pull over. Reluctantly, the hearse slowed and came to a stop on the shoulder of the road. Daniel parked behind it, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out of the car. The chilly air hit him immediately. Carrying with it the damp scent of earth and decay, he approached the hearse cautiously, his flashlight beam bouncing off the glossy black paint. Through the rear window, he could see two figures inside: the driver, a wiry man with shaggy hair, and another person sitting next to him, dressed in a dark suit. "Good evening, gentlemen," Daniel said firmly, tapping on the driver's window with his flashlight. "Mind telling me what you're doing out here so late?" The driver rolled down the window halfway, revealing a face etched with nervousness. Hi, officer," he stammered. "We're just, transporting a body to a private estate. Everything's legit, I swear." Daniel frowned. Something about the man's tone didn't sit right with him. "Step out of the vehicle, please," he instructed. Both men complied reluctantly, stepping into the cold night air. The second man, who appeared to be the undertaker based on his formal attire, looked visibly uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact as if trying to hide something. "What's your name?" Daniel asked the driver. "Harold. Harold Klein," the man replied quickly, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "And you?" Daniel turned to the undertaker. "Franklin Hayes," the man muttered, adjusting his tie nervously. Daniel nodded, jotting their names down in his notebook. Then he glanced at the roof of the hearse where a large coffin was strapped securely. It caught his attention immediately, not because coffins were unusual for hearses, but because this one seemed different. For starters, it was far larger than any standard coffin he'd ever seen. Its surface shimmered faintly under the moonlight, almost as if it were made of metal rather than wood. "That's quite a box you've got there," Daniel remarked, pointing his flashlight at the coffin. "Mind if I take a closer look?" Harold hesitated, glancing at Franklin, who shook his head almost imperceptibly. "It's sealed," Harold said finally, his voice cracking slightly. "We're not supposed to open it. Client's orders." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Client's orders? That's odd. Who's the client?" Again, Harold hesitated. "Some guy paid us cash to deliver it. Said it was urgent. Look, officer, we don't know anything else. We're just doing our job." Something wasn't adding up. Daniel's gut told him there was more to this story than either of them was letting on. He circled the hearse, examining the coffin from all angles. The longer he looked at it, the stranger it seemed. The edges were too precise, too perfect. And those faint glimmers. It wasn't just reflection. It was almost as if the material itself emitted light. "I need you to open it," Daniel said, firmly turning back to Harold and Franklin. Harold's eyes widened in alarm. "You can't do that, we'll get in trouble." "This is a traffic stop," Daniel reminded him sternly. "And given how jumpy you both are, I have reason to believe there might be something illegal going on here. Open the coffin, or I will." For a moment, neither man moved. They exchanged panicked looks, clearly weighing their options. Finally, Franklin sighed and reached into his pocket, pulling out a set of keys. "Fine," he muttered. "But don't say we didn't warn you." With trembling hands, Franklin unlocked the straps securing the coffin to the roof of the hearse. Together, he and Harold lowered it carefully to the ground. Daniel watched closely, his hand resting instinctively on the grip of his holstered gun. There was no telling what might be inside. When the lid was finally pried open, Daniel leaned forward, shining his flashlight into the interior. What he saw stopped him dead in his tracks. Instead of a human body, the coffin contained a strange, metallic pod. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with an inner light. The design was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Alien, almost futuristic. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the distant hoot of an owl and the soft hum of the pod, which grew louder as Daniel stared at it. Harold broke the silence first. "I swear we didn't know what was inside," and he blurted out. "Some guy paid us cash to transport it. We thought it was just weird art or something." Daniel barely heard him. His mind raced with questions. Where had this thing come from? What was it doing here? And most importantly, why did it feel like it was watching him? Before anyone could react further, the pod began to change. Its surface rippled and a thin vapor seeped out, curling lazily in the cool night air. Daniel instinctively stepped back, his heart pounding. The others followed suit, their faces pale with shock. Then, without warning, the lid of the pod cracked, open. From within emerged a figure, not entirely human but humanoid. Its skin was translucent, revealing glowing veins beneath. Its eyes locked onto Daniel's, and though no words were spoken, he somehow understood. "Help me." The moment the figure emerged from the pod, time seemed to slow down. Daniel stood frozen, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand as its beam illuminated the strange creature before him. It was taller than an average human, with smooth, translucent skin that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Beneath the surface of its skin, glowing veins pulsed with a soft blue light, casting an ethereal glow over the scene. Its eyes were large and luminous, filled with an intelligence that felt both ancient and incomprehensible. Daniel's mind raced. Was this some kind of prank? A movie prop gone wrong? Or was it something far more extraordinary? He glanced back at Harold and Franklin, who looked like they might bolt at any second. Their faces were ghostly pale, their mouths hanging open in silent disbelief. What is that?" Harold finally managed to choke out, pointing a shaky finger at the figure. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, keeping his voice steady despite the knot tightening in his stomach. "But we're going to find out." The figure didn't move, aggressively. Instead, it stood quietly, studying Daniel with those unnervingly bright eyes. Then, without speaking, it communicated directly into his mind. "Help me." The words weren't spoken aloud. They resonated inside Daniel's head, clear and urgent. He blinked, startled by the sensation. "Did you hear that?" he asked, turning to Harold and Franklin. "Hear what?" Harold replied, his voice trembling. "I didn't hear anything." Franklin shook his head vigorously, clutching his arms as if trying to shield himself from the cold, or perhaps from fear. "This isn't real," he muttered. "This can't be happening." Ignoring their panic, Daniel focused on the figure. He took a cautious step forward, lowering his flashlight so the beam wouldn't blind it. "Who are you?" he asked, aloud, unsure whether it would understand or respond. Again, the response came not through sound but through thought. "My name is Eli. I mean no harm." The voice in Daniel's mind was calm and measured, yet tinged with exhaustion. "I need your help." Daniel swallowed hard. This was beyond anything he'd ever encountered in his years as a police officer. But something about Eli's presence reassured him it wasn't hostile. If anything, it seemed vulnerable, almost fragile. "Why were you in that pod?" Daniel asked, gesturing toward the metallic container still resting on the ground. Eli hesitated, as if gathering strength to explain. "My people fled our dying world long ago," he began. "We sought refuge among the stars, but many ships were lost. I was injured during the journey and placed in stasis to survive. My pod was meant to protect me until my people could retrieve me. And now?" Daniel pressed gently. "Now, I am alone," Eli admitted. "My ship never returned. I do not know if my people survived." Harold interrupted nervously, stepping backward as if trying to put distance between himself and the alien. "Okay, this is way too much for me. We didn't sign up for this. Let's just call someone else, like the government or something, and let them deal with it." Daniel shot him a sharp look. "You don't get to walk away after dumping this thing on a random road. You're staying right here until we figure out what's going on." "But, no buts," Daniel snapped firmly. Turning back to Eli, he softened his tone. "Is there anything else you can tell us? Anything that might help us understand how to assist you?" Eli nodded slowly. "There may be others like me," he said. "Other pods scattered across this planet. If you can locate them, we may be able to communicate with my people again." Before Daniel could respond, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the night air. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, growing brighter as multiple vehicles sped down the country road. Harold groaned audibly. "Oh great, backup's here." Daniel frowned. He hadn't called for reinforcements, at least not yet. Whoever was coming clearly knew about the situation already. As the convoy of cars pulled up behind his patrol vehicle, Daniel recognized the distinctive markings of federal agents' vehicles. This wasn't just local law enforcement showing up. This was bigger. Doors slammed shut as several men and women in dark suits stepped out, their expressions grim and purposeful. One of them, a tall woman with short blonde hair, approached Daniel confidently. She flashed a badge before introducing herself. "Agent Laura Bennett, FBI," she stated briskly. Her sharp gaze swept over the scene, the open pod, the alien figure, and the two visibly shaken civilians. "Officer Carter, I assume you're responsible for this discovery?" "Yes, ma'am," Daniel replied, straightening his posture. "But I'm not sure what exactly we found here." Agent Bennett nodded curtly. "That's why we're taking over. This matter falls under federal jurisdiction." She turned her attention to Eli, studying him with clinical detachment. "And you are?" Eli met her gaze calmly. "I am Eli," he responded telepathically, addressing everyone present. "I come in peace." Agent Bennett raised an eyebrow, clearly unaccustomed to receiving answers via thought. "Interesting," she murmured. To her team, she added, "Secure the area. We'll need to transport the subject and the pod to a secure facility immediately." "Wait a minute," Daniel interjected, stepping forward. "You can't just take him without explaining what's going on. What are your intentions?" "Our intentions are classified," Agent Bennett replied coolly. "But rest assured we have protocols in place for situations like this. Your cooperation is appreciated, but not required." Daniel clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He didn't trust these agents. There was something cold and calculating about their demeanor, as if they viewed Eli not as a sentient being but as a specimen to be studied, or worse. As the agents began setting up equipment to load the pod onto a truck, Daniel noticed Eli's glowing veins dimming slightly, as though he were growing weaker. Without thinking, Daniel moved closer to him, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I won't let them hurt you." Eli looked at Daniel, gratitude shining in his luminous eyes. "Thank you," he said silently. "But be careful. Trust is rare among your kind." Daniel nodded grimly. He knew Eli was right. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Daniel couldn't stand idly by while strangers took control of the situation. Somehow he had to ensure Eli's safety and uncover the truth behind the mysterious pod and its occupant. As the agents worked efficiently around them, Daniel made a silent vow. No matter what it took, he would protect Eli and maybe, just maybe, prove that humanity was capable of compassion even in the face of the unknown. The ride to the government facility was silent and tense. Eli sat in the back of a black van, flanked by 2 armed guards who kept their weapons trained on him. Despite their caution, Eli remained calm, his glowing veins pulsing softly in the dim light. He seemed almost detached, as though he understood that resisting would only make things worse. Daniel sat across from him, his hands gripping the edge of the seat tightly. His mind raced with questions, doubts, and fears about what might happen next. Agent Laura Bennett rode up front, occasionally glancing back at Daniel through the rearview mirror. She hadn't said much since they left the scene, but her sharp eyes missed nothing. When the convoy finally arrived at the facility, a sprawling compound hidden deep in the woods, Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. The place looked more like a fortress than a research center, with high walls, security cameras, and armed personnel patrolling the perimeter. As they entered the building, Daniel noticed how sterile everything was. The floors gleamed under bright fluorescent lights, and the air smelled faintly of disinfectant. They were led into a large room filled with advanced technology, computers, monitors, and machines Daniel couldn't even begin to understand. Scientists in white lab coats bustled around, setting up equipment while agents in dark suits stood watch. Eli was guided to the center of the room, where a chair had been prepared for him. Though no one explicitly told him to sit, he did so willingly, his movements slow and deliberate. Wires were attached to his arms and chest, connecting him to various machines that began recording data immediately. Daniel watched uneasily as the scientists studied their screens, murmuring to each other in hushed tones. "What are you doing to him?" Daniel asked, stepping forward. Agent Bennett turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "We're running tests," she replied simply, "to assess his condition and gather information." "Tests? Like medical tests?" She nodded. "Yes. We need to understand what we're dealing with here. This isn't just some random encounter, it's a matter of national security." Daniel frowned. "National security? He hasn't done anything wrong, he's not a threat." "We don't know that yet," Bennett countered sharply. "And until we do, we have to proceed carefully." Eli interrupted their conversation, not with words but with thoughts projected directly into everyone's minds. "I am not your enemy," he said firmly, "but I fear there are those among my people who may see yours as such." The room fell silent. Even the scientists paused their work, staring at Eli in stunned disbelief. Daniel stepped closer to him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "What do you mean?" he asked gently. "Who else is out there?" Eli hesitated before responding. "When our ships scattered, many pods landed on different worlds. Some of my kind may have survived, but not all of them share my desire for peace. There are factions among us divided over how to interact with new civilizations." Agent Bennett's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying there could be others like you, potentially hostile ones, on Earth right now?" "It is possible," Eli admitted, "but I cannot be certain. That is why I must find the others. If they exist, I must speak with them." Bennett exchanged a glance with one of her colleagues, then turned back to Daniel. "This changes things," she said quietly. "If what he says is true, we're dealing with something far bigger than we anticipated." Daniel nodded grimly. "Then let him go. Let him find the others. You can't keep him locked up here like some kind of prisoner." "It's not that simple," Bennett replied. "Even if we wanted to release him, which we don't, we still need answers, and time is not on our side." As the discussion continued, Daniel noticed Eli growing weaker. His glowing veins dimmed further, and his breathing became shallow. Alarmed, Daniel turned to the nearest scientist. "What's happening to him? Is he okay?" The scientist checked the readings on the monitor. "His vitals are dropping," she reported. "Whatever energy source sustains him is fading." Daniel spun around to face Bennett. "You're killing him! Whatever you're doing here, it's hurting him. Bennett hesitated, clearly conflicted. Finally, she gave a curt nod to the scientists. Disconnect him. We'll monitor him remotely for now. Relieved, Daniel helped Eli stand once the wires were removed. The alien swayed slightly, but Daniel steadied him, guiding him to a nearby bench. Thank you, Eli whispered telepathically, his voice weak but grateful. You saved me earlier, Daniel replied softly. Now it's my turn to return the favor. Over the next few hours, Daniel learned more about Project Horizon, the classified initiative Agent Bennett had mentioned briefly during their drive. Using documents provided reluctantly by Bennett, Daniel discovered that similar pods had been found in remote locations across the country and possibly the world. However, none had ever been opened successfully before now. Attempts to study the contents had ended in failure, often resulting in catastrophic containment breaches. What happened during those attempts? Daniel asked cautiously. Bennett sighed, rubbing her temples as if the memories pained her. Some of the pods contained entities, not like Eli, more aggressive, less willing to communicate. They caused significant damage and loss of life. Daniel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. And you think Eli might lead you to more like them? I don't know what to think, Bennett admitted, but I do know this. If there are others out there, we need to find them first before someone else does. Despite her stern demeanor, Daniel sensed a flicker of doubt in her voice. Perhaps she wasn't entirely convinced that locking Eli away was the right move. Maybe, just maybe, he could appeal to her sense of morality. Agent Bennett, Daniel began carefully, if Eli is telling the truth, and I believe he is, he could be our best chance at avoiding disaster, but only if we trust him. Only if we let him help us. Bennett stared at him for a long moment, her jaw tightening. Then she looked at Eli, who met her gaze calmly, despite his weakened state. Finally, she nodded slowly. All right. For now, we'll hold off on further testing. But if anything goes wrong, if he so much as blinks suspiciously, I'm pulling the plug. Daniel exhaled sharply, relief washing over him. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a start. As long as Eli was safe, for now, they still had a chance to set things right. Unbeknownst to them, however, higher authorities were already mobilizing. News of the discovery had reached the ears of powerful figures within the government, and they weren't interested in diplomacy. To them, Eli wasn't a potential ally. He was an asset, and assets could be exploited. It started with a phone call. Agent Laura Bennett's secure line buzzed late at night, waking her from a restless sleep. She answered it quickly, expecting updates on Eli's condition or new orders regarding containment protocols. Instead, she heard a voice she recognized immediately, a senior official from Washington, someone whose word carried weight far beyond hers. We're taking over, the voice said without preamble. Your operation has gone on long enough. Bring the subject to Site Omega within 24 hours. Bennett frowned, gripping the phone tightly. Sir, I must advise against rushing this. The subject, Eli, is cooperative, but he's also fragile. Moving him now could jeopardize everything we've learned so far. The response was cold and final. That's not your decision to make. If you can't handle this, we'll send someone who can. Bennett hung up, her mind racing. She knew what sending someone meant. Agents who didn't care about diplomacy or ethics, only results. They wouldn't hesitate to experiment on Eli, or worse, if they thought it served their purpose. For the first time since joining the FBI, she felt torn between duty and conscience. When Daniel arrived at the facility early the next morning, he found Bennett pacing outside the lab where Eli was being held. Her usual composure was gone, replaced by visible stress lines etched into her face. We have a problem, she said bluntly when she saw him approach. What kind of problem? Daniel asked, his stomach sinking. Higher-ups want to move Eli to another location, a black site. You don't want to know what happens there. Daniel's blood ran cold. You mean they're going to torture him? Experiment on him? I don't know exactly what they'll do, Bennett admitted, lowering her voice. But it won't be good. And if we let them take him, we might never see him again. Daniel clenched his fists. Then we can't let that happen. We need to get him out of here. Bennett hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. I agree. But breaking him out won't be easy. This place is crawling with guards, cameras, and alarms. One wrong move and we're all dead, or worse. Daniel nodded grimly. Do you trust me? She met his gaze, searching for any sign of doubt. Finding none, she exhaled sharply. Yes, let's do this. They spent the next few hours planning every detail of the escape. Bennett reached out to her cousin, Mia, a tech-savvy college student who specialized in cybersecurity. Mia had always been fascinated by conspiracy theories and hacking government systems, though she'd never expected to actually use those skills in real life. When Bennett explained the situation, Mia didn't hesitate to help. Using a laptop connected remotely to the facility's network, Mia worked tirelessly to disable key security measures. First, she looped surveillance footage, creating a false feed that showed empty hallways instead of the chaos they planned to unleash. Next, she triggered minor malfunctions in the building's power grid, causing flickering lights and sparking electrical panels throughout the compound. Finally, she hacked into the guard rotation schedules, redirecting patrols away from critical areas. Meanwhile, Daniel prepared Eli for the breakout. He entered the lab quietly, finding the alien sitting calmly despite the rising tension outside. Eli, he whispered, kneeling beside him. We're getting you out of here. Do you understand? Eli nodded, his glowing veins dimming slightly. I understand, he replied telepathically, but many will resist. That's why we need your help, Daniel said firmly. Can you create barriers? Stop people from following us? I can try, Eli responded, but my strength is limited. It'll be enough, Daniel assured him. Just stay close to me. By midnight, everything was ready. Bennett signaled Daniel and Mia via encrypted messages, confirming that the coast was clear, for now. Together, they moved swiftly through the labyrinthine corridors of the facility, guided by Mia's instructions over earpieces. Every step felt like walking on thin ice. One misstep could bring the entire operation crashing down. When they reached the lab, Daniel helped Eli to his feet, while Bennett kept watch at the door. As they stepped into the hallway, an alarm blared suddenly, shattering the silence. Guards appeared almost instantly, shouting orders and aiming rifles at the group. Now Eli! Daniel yelled. Eli raised his hands and a shimmering blue barrier erupted around them, deflecting bullets and forcing the guards to retreat. Sparks flew as energy crackled along the edges of the shield, illuminating the darkened corridor. Behind them, Mia's sabotage caused more chaos. Doors slammed shut automatically, trapping pursuing guards inside rooms, while sparks from damaged wiring sent several men scrambling backward. This way! Bennett shouted, leading the group toward a service elevator hidden deep within the complex. They piled inside just as the barrier began to fade, leaving Eli visibly drained. As the elevator descended, Daniel turned to Eli, concern etched across his face. Are you okay? Can you keep going? I must, Eli replied weakly. For my people, and yours. The elevator doors opened onto a maintenance tunnel that led outside. Ahead, headlights from a waiting van pierced the darkness. Mia sat behind the wheel, revving the engine impatiently. Get in, she called out as they approached. They climbed into the van and Mia sped off before the gates even finished opening. Behind them, sirens wailed, growing louder as vehicles gave chase. Bullets pinged off the back of the van, but Mia skillfully navigated the narrow roads, weaving between trees and abandoned buildings until they finally lost their pursuers. Breathing heavily, Daniel looked back at Eli, who leaned against the seat, his glow faint but steady. We did it, he said softly. For now, you're safe. Agent Bennett nodded, relief washing over her features. But this isn't over. They'll come after us again, and next time they won't hold back. Daniel stared ahead, determination hardening his expression. Then we'll be ready. Unbeknownst to them, however, the authorities weren't the only ones hunting Eli. Somewhere in the vast wilderness surrounding Willow Creek, other pods lay hidden, some containing allies, others harboring threats. The clock was ticking, and the stakes were higher than ever. The van rumbled along winding mountain roads, leaving behind the chaos of the government facility. Daniel sat in the front passenger seat, gripping the edge of his seat tightly as Mia navigated the treacherous terrain. Behind them, Eli rested quietly, his energy visibly depleted after the escape. Agent Bennett kept watch through the rear window, scanning the darkness for any sign of pursuit. "We need to find somewhere safe," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "Somewhere they won't think to look." "There's an old hunting cabin, about 20 miles from here," Bennett replied. "It's off the grid, no electricity or cell service. If anyone's following us, it'll slow them down." "Perfect," Daniel muttered. "Let's hope it stays that way." They reached the cabin just before dawn. Nestled deep in the woods, it was barely visible from the dirt road that led to it. The structure looked weathered but sturdy, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Inside, the air smelled faintly of damp wood and old ash. A small fireplace stood against one wall, flanked by mismatched furniture and dusty shelves. Mia immediately set up her laptop on the kitchen table, connecting it to a portable satellite modem. "I'll keep monitoring their movements," she said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "If they're tracking us, I'll know soon enough." Daniel helped Eli settle into a chair near the fire, draping a blanket over his shoulders. The alien's glow had dimmed significantly since the breakout, and his breathing was shallow. Despite his weakened state, Eli managed a small smile. "Thank you," he whispered telepathically. "You risk much for me." "It's not just for you," Daniel replied softly. "It's for everyone. If what you say is true, if there are others like you out there, we need to find them before the wrong people do." Bennett joined them at the table, spreading out maps and documents she'd brought from the facility. According to these records, several pods have been recovered over the years, though none were opened successfully. Most were stored in secure locations, military bases, research labs, even private estates. "Do we know where those places are?" Daniel asked. "Some of them," Bennett admitted. "But getting close won't be easy. These sites are heavily guarded." Eli leaned forward slightly, his voice weak but clear in their minds. "I may be able to sense the presence of my people within the pods. If we can locate them, I might awaken them." "That's assuming they're friendly," Bennett cautioned. "What if they're not? What if they see us as enemies?" "Then I will speak with them," Eli insisted. "My kind values reason above all else. Violence is a last resort." Daniel nodded slowly. "All right. So we start looking for these pods. But how do we get past the guards?" Mia looked up from her laptop. "Leave that part to me. I can disable cameras, loop footage, maybe even fake access codes. It'll take time, but I can do it." As the group discussed their plan, the weight of the task ahead pressed heavily on them. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. Yet despite the odds, none of them considered backing down. For Daniel, protecting Eli felt like the right thing to do, not just because the alien had saved him, but because it represented a chance for humanity to prove itself worthy of trust. By midday, Mia had identified 3 potential locations where pods might still be hidden. 2 were military installations, while the third belonged to a wealthy businessman rumored to dabble in extraterrestrial artifacts. "This guy's place is our best bet," Mia said, pointing to the map. "Less security than the military sites, and it's closer." "Good," Daniel said. "We'll head there tonight." Before they left, Eli shared more about his people, the Caliph, and their history. He described a civilization once thriving on a distant planet, advanced beyond human comprehension in fields like quantum mechanics and interdimensional travel. But their progress came at a cost. Environmental collapse and internal conflict tore their society apart. In desperation, they launched ships carrying survivors across the stars, hoping to find new homes. Many ships were lost, Eli explained. Ours was one of the last to leave. When we arrived here, I was injured during the descent. My pod was damaged, and I entered stasis to survive. Others may have fared better or worse. Daniel listened intently, his respect for Eli growing with each word. If your people are divided, how will we know who to trust? I cannot answer that, Eli admitted. But I believe most would prefer peace over war. We are explorers, not conquerors. Night fell quickly, blanketing the forest in shadow. The group packed supplies into the van and set out for the businessman's estate. As they drove, Mia worked tirelessly to disable the property's security systems. By the time they arrived, the cameras were offline and the gate stood unguarded. This feels too easy, Bennett murmured as they approached the mansion. Maybe it is, Daniel replied, or maybe they don't expect anyone to come this far. Inside the estate, they moved cautiously through dimly lit halls lined with priceless art and strange relics. One room caught their attention, a locked vault protected by biometric scanners. Mia knelt beside the door, attaching a small device to bypass the system. Within minutes, the lock clicked open. Inside the vault lay another pod, identical to the one that had carried Eli. Its surface shimmered faintly, pulsing with a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. Eli stepped forward, placing his hand gently on the metallic casing. A low hum filled the room as the pod began to activate. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the mansion. Red lights flashed and shouts echoed in the distance. "We've got company," Bennett warned, drawing her weapon. Eli ignored the commotion, focusing entirely on the pod. The lid cracked open, releasing a swirl of vapor. From within emerged another figure, taller than Eli, with sharper features and glowing green veins. Its eyes scanned the room, locking onto Eli. "Brother," the newcomer said telepathically, its voice deeper and colder than Eli's. "Why have you awakened me?" "I seek unity among our people," Eli responded calmly. "And answers. Do you know what became of our fleet?" The newcomer hesitated, then shook its head. "I remember only fragments. Conflict. Destruction. Betrayal." Its gaze shifted to Daniel and the others. "These humans, they aided you?" "Yes," Eli confirmed. "They wish to help us rebuild. Together, we can forge a new path." The newcomer studied them silently, its expression unreadable. Then, without warning, it raised a hand, sending a pulse of energy toward the door. Guards burst into the room, weapons drawn, but the alien's barrier held firm, deflecting their attacks. "Enough," the newcomer declared. "Violence solves nothing. Let us speak further, but not here." With that, the barrier dissolved and the guards lowered their weapons, startled by the sudden ceasefire. Eli turned to Daniel, gratitude shining in his luminous eyes. "You were right," he said. "There is hope, yet." But as they prepared to leave, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The newcomer's presence added complexity to an already dangerous mission, and somewhere out there others awaited discovery. Allies, enemies. Only time would tell. The group slipped away into the night, heading back toward the safety of the cabin. For now they had succeeded, but the road ahead remained uncertain, fraught with challenges that tested not only their courage but also their faith in the unknown. The days following their encounter with the second Caliph were tense but productive. Back at the cabin, the group worked tirelessly to piece together the locations of other pods scattered across the country. With Mia's hacking skills and Bennett's access to classified documents, they identified several more sites, each one potentially holding another survivor from Eli's people. But time was running out. News of their escape had spread, and government agents were closing in, determined to recapture Eli and his newfound companion. Daniel noticed how the presence of the second Caliph, who introduced himself simply as Kale, changed the dynamic of their small team. Unlike Eli, Kale was cautious and reserved, his glowing green veins hinting at a strength that seemed almost intimidating. He rarely spoke telepathically unless necessary, preferring instead to observe the humans around him with quiet curiosity. "Duki, you trust him?" Daniel asked Eli one evening as they sat by the fire. "I do," Eli replied without hesitation. "Kale may seem distant, but his intentions are pure. Like me, He seeks answers. And peace. Daniel nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. Trusting Cale felt different than trusting Eli. There was something about the newcomer's sharp gaze and measured movements that made Daniel uneasy. Still, he reminded himself that they needed allies if they hoped to succeed. Meanwhile, Cale proved invaluable in planning their next moves. His knowledge of Calith technology allowed them to repair parts of the damaged pod that had carried Eli, turning it into a makeshift beacon capable of sending signals into space. If there are others like us out there, Cale explained, this signal will guide them here. As they prepared to activate the beacon, tensions outside the cabin grew thicker. Agents patrolled nearby towns, questioning locals and setting up roadblocks. It wouldn't be long before they tracked the group to the mountains. Knowing this, Daniel insisted on staying behind to buy the others time once the beacon was activated. No way, Bennett argued when he brought it up. We're in this together. You're not sacrificing yourself. I'm not asking anyone else to risk their lives, Daniel replied firmly. You've already done so much. Let me handle this part. Eli stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. Your bravery honors us, he said, but we cannot ask you to face danger alone. We will stand with you, as equals. Moved by Eli's words, Daniel relented. Together, the group devised a plan to protect the cabin while activating the beacon. They set traps along the forest paths leading to the property, using whatever materials they could find to create diversions. Mia programmed her laptop to trigger alarms remotely, giving them early warnings of approaching threats. Finally, the moment came. Under the cover of night, Kyle activated the beacon. A soft hum filled the air as energy pulsed outward, invisible to human eyes but detectable across vast distances. The group waited anxiously, unsure whether the signal would reach its intended recipients or attract unwanted attention. At first, nothing happened. Minutes stretched into hours, and exhaustion began to weigh heavily on everyone. Just as dawn broke over the horizon, however, the ground trembled faintly beneath their feet. Looking skyward, they saw it, a massive alien spacecraft descending silently from the heavens. Its arrival was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The ship's sleek design dwarfed everything around it, casting long shadows over the landscape as it hovered above the clearing near the cabin. Beams of golden light spilled from its underside, illuminating the rocky terrain below. A hatch opened, revealing a delegation of Calith emerging from within. Eli stepped forward, his glow brightening with excitement. They've come, he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. They've found us. The leader of the delegation approached Eli and Cale, bowing slightly in greeting. Their skin shimmered with a kaleidoscope of colors, marking them as elders among their kind. Through telepathic communication, they exchanged greetings and shared stories of survival and loss. Daniel, Bennett, and Mia watched from a short distance, overwhelmed by the sight before them. For the first time since this journey began, they felt a glimmer of hope, not just for Eli and his people, but for humanity itself. Before boarding the ship, Eli turned to Daniel and the others, gratitude shining in his luminous eyes. You have shown great courage and kindness, he said. Perhaps one day our peoples can stand side by side as friends. We'd like that, Daniel replied, smiling despite the lump in his throat. Take care of yourself, Eli. With a final nod, Eli joined the delegation, stepping aboard the ship alongside Cale. As the hatch closed and the vessel ascended into the sky, the group stood in silence, watching until it disappeared beyond the clouds. Back at the cabin, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as possible after such an extraordinary experience. Daniel resumed his duties as a police officer, though he often found himself gazing at the stars, wondering what adventures awaited Eli and his people among the cosmos. Bennett submitted her resignation from the FBI, choosing to focus on advocating for transparency and ethical treatment of extraterrestrial life. Mia continued her studies, inspired to pursue a career in astrophysics. Though their paths diverged, the bond they formed during those chaotic days remained unbroken. They had faced the unknown together and emerged stronger for it. And though the world might never know the full story of what happened in those mountains, the four of them carried the memory with pride. As dawn gave way to morning, Daniel climbed into his patrol car and drove back toward Willow Creek. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. Somewhere out there, among the stars, Eli and his people were forging a new future, one that humanity might one day share. And perhaps, just perhaps, that future would be brighter because of the choices they had made.